Alrighty, thank you all very much for your attention. I've asked my good friend and sponsor, Arthur, to share his experience with the second part of step 2.
Hi everybody, I'm Arthur. I'm Arthur, I'm alcoholic. Doesn't have to be that close. There you go. I have been through this work the way it's laid out in the steps, and with a sponsor who did the same. I'm still in the work. I've gone through my amends. I continue to make those as needed, and I work through 10 on a regular basis, and 11 and 12. I'm always open for. Everybody hear me okay? No. Okay. How about now? Yeah. All right. Okay. I think it's fitting we're talking about like mental illness. In the first step, when I went through it with my sponsor, I learned a lot about alcoholic addiction. In step 1, the doctor's opinion, Bill's story, in contemplating all those things was the framework for where we are today. Because, why would I want to even consider what is the premises in this step if I don't recognize that there's a problem? There's not going to be a willingness, right, to look at there even being a mental issue if I can't get past there being a physical one. So I say that because I think this is hindsight, because at the time it was really about function. It was about wanting to be in a place other than I was, because the place I wasn't any good. So the motive was not that I would figure things out, albeit that by the time I got to this point, I thought that's what I was supposed to do. I learned, again, in hindsight, in the step after that, I began to get a clearer picture of, in step 3, I began to understand the importance more of step 2. And in step 2, I really, really start to value in a way I didn't when I started step 1. And for me, it's unfolded in this way over the years. Coming in the Big Book Step Study was profoundly amazing to hear people talk about things that resonated so deeply. I never heard before. To be a part of the regular consistency in the message that we talk about in this work didn't exist anywhere that I was familiar with. And it was and is amazing and exciting, and it's full and packed with hope that if I just go through this and I do what I'm asked to do, I might actually be able to come to a place in recovery where I'll get a chance of my own to talk about it. And I'll have my own experience, and it'll be amazing. At some point when I started this work, I would say probably around the time when I started reading my first step, and all of the meetings that I had with my sponsor and conversations on the in-between, the things that I was learning about alcoholism, it began to become really, really clear that there was an idea that I had about what it meant to be an alcoholic, and then there was this. And they were very different. So it was perfect and in that, and a relief at the same time, to realize that they were so different, and that if I look at this the way that it's laid out in the book, and I follow the same path that is laid out, and I emulate my sponsor and try to align myself with those things, I might actually be able to change, or not be the way or feel the way that I was and operate the way that I did. And so by the time I got to this point, I was still thinking about relapse. I was thinking about all of the things that could take place. I was thinking about myself almost all the time, about whether or not I hit enough meetings, or whether or not I reached out enough, or I was doing the work perfectly enough, which is tempting in a group that comprehensively concentrates on the steps. There's this idea that creeps in that, this is the A group, so then I've got to be the A guy. And that's not true. You just can't see it at the time. I couldn't see it at the time. I can see it today. To put some shape or to that, I would say it's like then was walking into, I've got to be and achieve. I've got to do this, and if I do this, then it will mean this. And behind all of that was a constant search for security in a place where I had none. All fear-driven, all of it. I'll sit at the front row. I'll shake this guy's hand. I won't just read the step. I'll memorize the step. I'll play it while I'm sleeping. That kind of stuff all perpetuates the idea that I still have power. But step 1 reminds me that I have none. But at the time, you can't see it. It's hard to see it because the mind is broken, the mind is affected, the mind is infected. But we don't know. I didn't know that it was infected, although my sponsor did a great job at pointing out the infection all the time, and things that I would say, or behaviors, or ways that I would, comments that I would make that he would call me out on and say, that's really upside down. Why would you say something? But prior to meeting him, that was normal dialogue at home and at work and with people and in life. And, the disingenuousness of it all was so deep until there's a conversation with someone who lives outside of that state or has grown through it and is in a corrective, so to speak, state of mind. It would maybe never be pointed out to you, so then you're just doomed to die an alcoholic death. Like they kind of talk about. I just fast forwarded to the end. But that's what they're basically talking about, because if there's nothing changes, then nothing changes. So I jumped into step 2 with the intent that I was going to be able to tangibly demonstrate my closeness and nearness to God, believing that my job in step 2 was to figure out, somehow become better, align better, be a better student, be better, be, this constant push to, I'm going to fix this. So I'll have the perfect step 2. And I'll understand. The problem with that is that if looking at step 2 today versus then, is that I would be crazy to think that I'm going to do anything if I comprehended step 1. And I'm even more profoundly woken up to the fact in step 2 that there's hardly anything rational about my thinking, yet I'm walking through it thinking that I have the best solution to the problem. And knowing exactly what energy I'm supposed to put into this step. The truth is that I don't will anything for God. I don't move the pendulum of His power or its power by anything that I do, say, or number of meetings I attend, or where I share, or where I don't, or number of sponsees that I think I fix, which is another, crap lie, right? But all tied in to the ego that says that I do, that continually separates me from God. At the core of it is a thought. And I'm talking about it because it's at the crux of what we talk about in program, of this disease. The very thing that perpetuates my illness is an idea. The thing that secures me in the illness and guarantees that I'm going to stay there is the addiction. The problem with an idea is that while I'm in it, the illness, active, there's a part of my mind that recognizes that what I'm doing is not good. What I don't understand is that I've already lost the power to right it, to change it. It's a duality, if you will, that takes place, a schizophrenia. But make no mistake, it's a mental sickness. It's an absolute illness by every stretch of the meaning of illness. One of the ones that I recognize in people in my family, people closest to me that are still under the lash, not active addiction, but are very thoroughly alcoholic. Through and through. Sober, psychotic alcoholic. They can't see what they can't see because their seeing is the only normal one. We're talking about this. So I really appreciate the examples that the people that drew up the book, wrote the book, the extent they went to lay out some clarity to the types of things that occur in the mind of an alcoholic, which separates me from somebody who's not an alcoholic. The first thing I understand in step one is that my body's different. So there's the first thing that separates me from being the same as somebody who can drink. Is that I create, my body develops physical craving. It's not a normal reaction to alcohol. It's an abnormal one. Given enough time and enough effect by that and continual use with that, it will affect my mind to a point where things that were clear are no longer clear. They become clouded. And if it's clouded, then everything I am and do becomes clouded, because at the center between my shoulders is one thought process. Without an intervention, without something to stop that, without something to right that, I will depend upon it. Not because I'm an asshole or because I want to be a dick. It's simply because I don't know how to fix it, and I lack the power to put myself in a frame of constructive thinking and productive thought process that's not self-serving but serving to others, lifting up others. Those are all afterthoughts once you get, you realize they haven't, they've been afterthoughts by the time you're in your inventory. Everybody is an afterthought. You just tell yourself and live your life in an image where they're the first thought and wonder why they're so confused and don't understand you. It's because we don't demonstrate they're the first thought, because we are the thought. I am the thought. My mouth is saying, you're the priority. My actions are lying. selfishness, driven by 100 forms of fear. Fill in the blank. Self-delusion, self-pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. And we go, why are you pissed? What the hell's wrong with you? Which only leads them to go to a place where they start to wonder if there's something wrong with them. And in that way, it begins to permeate and eat its way through and touch the lives of people that we love and care about. Until their self-image is affected, their self-esteem is affected, all by the start of my train. And I have the audacity to look and go, why are you so mad? This is so serious. Like, it's frighteningly serious to know that I, at the drop of a hat, can walk into a situation and instantaneously become so dishonest that I'm blind. And believe the lie with every fiber of my being. That doesn't just make me crazy, it makes me a little bit dangerous. You know, think about whether or not you'd walk out that door right now and pick that friend. You know? You even recognize that on an Instagram post or a Facebook post. You even get a hint of that in somebody's comment about their life. Swipe delete. No friend. Right? Quick. Recognize it. There's a problem. Done with you. Crazy. So, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, but I was going through this step thinking, well, I'm having a hard time seeing insanity. So my sponsor, pivotal in pointing me in the right direction of reflection to see it. With simple things like they lay out here. You know, do I go out with one intent, and when I decide I don't want to be what I'm doing and party, do I go home? Do I stop when I want to? Do I have control? Very basic, rudimentary things that I can self-reflect on to see if I have the effect that they're talking about in here with insanity. What I was just sharing with you were all the other ways that it affects us. Because, you know, you've got one mind, so clearly if it's affecting you in alcoholism and your ability to see the truth about a circumstance that's literally destroying your life, there's a pretty good chance the rest of you isn't doing so well. But hard to see, especially if you're one of those drinkers that could put it down for a little while and then jump back into life and think you're okay. But let me shed some light on that for you. You're not. You're the same person before, during, and after the drink. The idea that you're something different is just one of the cunning and baffling features of alcoholism, which guarantees you're going to stay inside of a perpetual loop of insanity that's going to perpetuate itself in every aspect of your life and in every relationship it's going to touch. I was drunk when I wasn't drunk. Seriously. I have a litany of people that could bear witness to that could speak to it, that have been with me the past 25 years in my recovery, that were with me before my recovery, that are still there now, that could say what I'm saying is the truth. You know, this is so far beyond just the drink or the drug. You My sponsor once said to me, Arthur, if you had any idea how sick you are, you would jump in front of the next bus. And I just looked at him like, you're a prick. Like, I really, you suck, man. Like, I just don't like you. Like, why do you always have to be a jerk? Is there not a nice bone in you? Like, he would constantly, he still does that stuff today. He constantly brings me back full circle with comments like that. I don't get to operate in the painted narrative that I like to paint. You need somebody that can turn the mirror back on you and basically say, you're full of shit. Because at the core of this is that. The idea that I'm going to walk into AA and I'm going to fix it and then go home with my family who's been under the lash of it for the past however many years and say, look at me. Like, come on. Like, it doesn't occur that way. That's not what this is about. It's simply that you realized you were sick, you went to a hospital, and now you're treating it. There's no need for somebody to celebrate that with you, and if they are celebrating it, it's the celebration of the death of you. The death of the person that they can't stand, who's irrational and not reasonable and unloving and unkind and vindictive and spiteful and venomous, like all the things that I used to be. There is nothing that I could have done here for myself in step 2. I didn't instantly come to believe that I was insane. The important part in this reading is to ask myself when I'm here with my sponsor, which is what I did, whether or not I have the ability to write what I'm doing. I look at some of the effects of alcoholism and my inability to think straight through this reading, and it's really just designed for reflection to ask myself whether or not these things are true so that I can decide whether or not I need a step 3. You're not likely to meet the shining light of God here. There are people, though, I've heard that they have that awakening moment. It wasn't true for me. I wanted it to happen. I thought that was the function of this step. But it wasn't. It was an evidentiary read. Here is the evidence of why you might need to move forward in AA. That's its function. That's it. Do I think this way? Do I tell myself constant mistruths? And do I believe those mistruths? Because if I do, I might have some mental illness. I might have some mental insanity. That's the function of this. Period. We can tear it apart and romanticize it, and I could read the book back to you line by line, and none of that is going to serve you. Because it goes into the same thing that doesn't serve you. If this were enough, then I wouldn't need to be here on Saturday. Why am I here? If I have the power, then why did I show up? I show up just as an acknowledgement and demonstration that I don't. That I recognize and acknowledge that without an intervention, I'm going to think with the same thoughts, and I'm probably going to go back to doing the same things. It'll start with behaviors and attitudes first. And when that gets painful enough, I'm going to look for the same solution I always looked for. I'll put pauses in between. Believe me, I'll maximize and explore every means of satisfying my discomfort before I hit the drink, because that's the way that I can justify the big fight that I put up. After I've shocked myself to death, sexed myself to death, ate myself to death, spent my way to death, wore out everyone in the path in the process, then I'll drink. I can come back here if I'm lucky and say, I I tried. I was really trying. I burned up every bridge, man. I toasted it. In that order. Like, I already know what the story ends like. So, in this step, it's just an acknowledgement. Am I insane? Am I in the truth of what is wrong with me? Do I have physical craving? Because if I do, then this book tells me that I'm not likely going to be able to think my way into right living. If I could have done that, I would have done that in the prior step. The fact that I have to go to step 2 is validation that I need to. The fact that I have to look at the book at all. I don't see anybody here who's non-alcoholic reading this book. Having to go to the meeting. So, I would say that it is my experience. I would wrap it up in just saying that my experience is that it is exactly like they talk about, that I've come to believe in a power greater than myself. I didn't just believe. The idea was that I did, because that gave me comfort in telling myself that somewhere, that I could, I could make sure that I stayed. And all of it was just that I was really scared and I didn't understand what was happening. What I've learned is that God enacts in a way that has nothing to do with me. Irregardless of what I want, desire, think, or say, or claim, or work, or meetings, or people, or sponsees, He moves without my assistance. It's better this way. It's better that I come into Him than the other way around. And what's nice about that is that when you're walking in that way, in deeper work, there's confidence in that. There's an understanding of an acceptance of self and an acknowledgement that I know I need to be there. I know that I'm fallible. I know that on my own I'm not enough. And it's not because somebody here forced it down my throat. It's because I came to know. So my active will is free. I'm there because I want to be, as opposed to the time when I started this, the idea was that I had to be. I just didn't understand why I had to be. And I would kind of wrap that thought up by saying, kind of like when I would sit at meetings and say, prior to this work, and say, I'm Arthur, I'm an alcoholic, and I had no understanding of what that statement meant. Today I understand what it means, and that's the difference. So that when I'm aligning myself to be here, it's because I understand that, and my will's aligned with it. It's not because I think I need to be. And those two things are very different. And with that, there's a tremendous amount of peace. There's not an inner conflict. Is the fruit of that acknowledgement. Is that I'm not in a self-fight. I'm not white-knuckling it. I'm not desperately after something. It's more like a yield. And with that, I would wrap up. I'm anxious to hear everybody else. Thank you so much for letting me share.